I'm Tony Offit, 34. The morning my parents drove 9 hours to my office, I was reviewing a trust amendment for a client whose mother had stolen from her. The irony wasn't lost on me. It rarely is. Tuesday, 4:47 p.m., my assistant, Nadia, knocked once and didn't wait for an answer. Tony, there's a couple in the lobby. They've been here since 7 this morning. They say they're your parents. I set the amendment down. My hand went to my collar, to the silver pocket watch I've worn under every blouse since I was 10. I'd been waiting 7 years and 3 months for this afternoon. I knew exactly why they'd come. What I didn't know, what would come out of my father's mouth in the next 4 minutes, was the part even I hadn't planned for. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. I tell long-form family stories where the loudest person in the room doesn't win and the quietest person at the table walks out with their dignity intact. If you've ever needed to remember that boundaries don't have toe loud to hold, this one's for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. My firm is Whitford & Associates Wealth Management, 14th floor K Street, 2 blocks from McPherson Square. The view's nothing special, the work is. I joined Whitford this September after I finished my MBA at Kellogg. Greg Whitford gave me a small office and one piece of advice. Pick a specialty and own it. I picked trust and estate planning. More specifically, intra-family trust disputes. Cases where the people who were supposed to protect the money decided the money was theirs. In the last 3 years, I've handled 47 of those cases. 47 adult children sitting across from me with statements they didn't understand and feelings they couldn't name. I understand both. That Tuesday before Nadia knocked, I was looking at a fresh file. A woman named Hannah Briscoe, 29, software engineer. Her mother had liquidated her education trust to buy a timeshare in Cabo, $83,000. Hannah found out when her cousin's wedding email mentioned the property. Hannah's first question to me had been, "Is this normal?" I'd said, "Define normal. I have a specialty I never advertised. I'm the lawyer who already knows what your family is about to do because mine already did it." I don't say that to clients. They figure it out on their own eventually. Hannah figured it out by the second meeting when I quoted a withdrawal pattern back to her she hadn't shown me yet. My desk is uncluttered. 1 legal pad, 1 fountain pen, 1 framed photo off my grandfather, Walter, from a vacation in 1996. He's holding a fishing rod. He's looking at the lake, not the camera. Behind him, his cottage in Beaufort, the one Margaret never liked. I was writing a paragraph about discretionary trustee powers when I heard Nadia in the hallway. Her steps were faster than her usual. Then the knock. Nadia opened the door before I said, "Come in." That's how I knew it was unusual. She's a person who waits. Tony. She closed the door behind her, voice low. A man and a woman, older. They've been in the lobby since 7 this morning. They didn't have an appointment. I kept the fountain pen. They told the receptionist they're your parents. Drove up from Asheville last night. Got here at 5 this morning. Coffee shop downstairs until the building opened. I didn't say anything for a moment. I let the information settle the way I'd let a difficult clause settle on a page. Read it twice, then decide what it actually meant. What did they bring? Nadia hesitated. A manila envelope. Older. The red string closure. I saw a notary seal through it. I closed my eyes for half a second. My hand went to my collar. The pocket watch warm against my skin. Engraved letters I don't need to read anymore because they live behind my eyes. Make it count. I haven't seen them in 7 years and 3 months. I count it that way because I started counting in March 2019. The week the dust settled after my grandfather's funeral. The week the yellowed envelope came in the mail. I opened my eyes. Bring them to conference room B, give them water. I'll be in there in 15 minutes. 15, Nadia tilted her head. You don't want to go down now. No, she studied my face the way she studies a problem at her desk, looking for the inconsistency. Tony, are you okay? I considered the question. I will be. She nodded once, turned to go. At the door, she stopped. Tony, you want me to pull the Walter folder? I exhaled. Yes, bring it to my office first. Not the conference room, not yet. She closed the door behind her. I gave myself 15 minutes. Not because I needed to prepare, because I needed them to wait. There's a rhythm to people like my mother. Margaret functions on momentum. She'd been awake since 5. She'd been rehearsing since the drive up. Every minute longer in our lobby was a minute her rehearsal frayed. I walked the long hallway to the south end of the floor, past Greg Whitford's office, past the partners' lounge, to the elevator bank where the frosted glass partition hides the lobby's interior from anyone who isn't trying to see in. I leaned a shoulder against the wall, looked once through the seam in the glass. She was sitting in the right-hand chair under the print of the mall at dawn. Black wool cardigan with the bone buttons, the brand from 2012. Sloan and Fee. They retired the line in 2014. She'd kept the cardigan because she's that kind of careful. Phil was beside her, thinner, hair fully white now where it used to be the color of dry oak. He sat with Heiselbos on his knees, hands clasped, eyes on the carpet. Margaret's purse was on her lap. On top of the purse, the manila envelope, red string wound twice around the closure. A notary's embossing dimpled the corner. They hadn't driven 9 hours without paperwork. They never have. I touched the pocket watch through my blouse. My grandfather used to say a thing about my mother. He said it once after a Sunday dinner while we were drying dishes. He said, "When the offits come with envelopes, count the silverware." He didn't say it as a joke. He said it the way he said most things, as a fact. He'd already verified. I pushed off the wall, walked back toward my office. I had a folder to look at first. Let me back up just briefly. I grew up in a house in Asheville my parents bought in 1991. 3 bedrooms, finished basement, brick. Phil worked at Westinghouse out of Greenville. Margaret didn't work. She managed, which is what she'd call it. I had a half-brother named Doug, 12 years older. Phil's son from his first wife, a woman named Helen who died in 1982 of complications from pneumonia. Doug came to Margaret already grown a little, and she loved him in the specific way you love a person who's not exactly yours. Twice as hard, with one eye always on the witness. The witness was my grandfather, Walter. Walter Offit didn't like Margaret. He told my father at the wedding rehearsal in 1988 that Phil was marrying down. He didn't whisper it. He said it during a toast that no one wrote down, Beaudevrion remembered. Margaret never forgave him. She wasn't built to. For 30 years, she ran a quiet campaign of attrition. She didn't invite Walter to my baptisms. She lost his Christmas cards. She made sure Doug got the front row hugs and the photographs. Walter watched. The Christmas I turned 10, he handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a silver pocket watch with a hunter case. Hamilton inscribed on the back. 2 words make it count. Margaret picked it up off the table, turned it over, said loud enough for the room. "Walter, that's a man's watch." Walter took a sip of his coffee. "It belongs to whoever earns it." He didn't look at her when he said it. I didn't understand what he meant until I was 25 and learned what was in my trust account, or rather what wasn't. But that's later. What matters here is that I was 10 and the watch was warm and my grandfather saw something in me that I hadn't seen yet. 5:02 p.m. I walked into the lobby. Margaret stood up first. Phil rose half a beat later. Margaret leads. Phil follows. Some things don't unlearn. She came toward me with her arms half raised. The gesture of a hug that hadn't been earned in 7 years. I sidestepped it gently, offered my hand instead. "Margaret, Phil, come with me." Her arms dropped. She covered the moment with a tight smile. "Sweetheart, you look so tired." The sweetheart was deliberate. It was the opening salvo of every Margaret negotiation I remembered from childhood. Soften the target. Established maternal frame. Lock the room. I didn't take the bait. It's been a busy week. This way. I walked them down the hall. Past 2 of the associates' offices. Past the open bullpen where 4 analysts had their heads down. Past Greg Whitford's office. Door open. Greg on a call. Eyes flicking up just long enough to register that something unusual was passing. He didn't react. He doesn't, when he doesn't have to. Conference Room B is the glass one on the south side. View of K Street through one wall. View of our floor through the other. Vertical blinds on both. Currently open. Cherrywood table. 8 chairs. I keep it deliberately neutral. Please sit. Margaret took the chair facing the window. Phil sat to her left. I sat across from them, not next to standard intake configuration. Distance I line table is buffer. Can I get you water? That would be lovely. Margaret folded her hands on top of the manila envelope. I poured 2 glasses from the carafe on the credenza, set them down, sat. It's good to see you both. What brings you to D.C.? Margaret took a small breath. The kind of breath she takes before she delivers a speech she has been rehearsing in the car. Honey, we need to have an honest conversation. She didn't pick up the water. She untied the red string from the manila envelope. Slow, like she was unfastening a button. Phil watched her hands. So did I. She removed 3 pages. Notary seal embossed bottom right. Blue ink. Fresh. She slid the document across the table toward me. Slow, ritualistic. We had this prepared by our attorney in Asheville. We thought it would be clearer than trying to explain in person without context. I took the document in both hands. Read it without changing expression. Page 1, opening paragraph. After decades of love and provision, we Philip and Margaret Offutt find ourselves at a moment of unprecedented financial difficulty. Page 2, the lake house at Lake Lure. Equity loan. Default $412,000 owed foreclosure auction, scheduled, July 15th, $300,000, needed by July 8th to refinance with a buyer they'd already lined up. Pagathry, a single paragraph. In recognition of the sacrifices made by Philip and Margaret Offutt in raising and providing for Tony Marie Offutt, Tony Marie Offutt hereby agrees to transfer $300,000 from her personal accounts to the joint account of Philip and Margaret Offutt no later than July 8th, 2026. Below it, a blank signature line, my name printed underneath. Notary seal dated 3 days ago, Asheville, North Carolina. Stamp belonging to one Brian Pratt, Buncombe County. I read all 3 pages twice. Not because I didn't understand the first time, because I wanted them to sit in the silence. The silence got long. Margaret broke it. She leaned forward in her chair, hands flat on the table. Her voice dropped to a register I remembered from every kitchen conversation of my childhood. The low, gentle, surgical register she used when she was about to say something she had decided was the truth regardless. We sacrificed everything for you, Tony. You owe us. I set the document down, centered it on the table. I'd known the number would be 300,000. I'd known it would be the lake house. I hadn't known the exact deadline date, but I'd guessed within a week. What surprised me was the number on page 2, 412,000 owed. That was new information. I held it in my head for half a second and did the math. 300,000 was the gap between the equity loan balance and what they could refinance for. 300,000. The ballpark almost to the dollar of what they'd taken from my trust between 2008 and 2016. They hadn't asked for what they thought I had. They'd asked for what they thought I owed. The arithmetic was almost elegant. I didn't share any of that with them. I looked at my mother. Margaret, may I ask a clarifying question? She blinked at the use of her first name. I'd called her Mom for 33 years. She wasn't ready for the change. Of course, sweetheart, where's Doug? Phil's eyes flicked up, Margaret's mouth tightened. Doug's situation in Tampa is complicated right now. He's not in a position to contribute. He was a co-signer on the lake house, wasn't he? That was a formality at the time. He's not legally. Phil interrupted. Soft, almost apologetic, Margaret. She turned to him. Her eyes did a fast, hard thing. He looked at his hands. I let the moment breathe, let them sit in their own small fault line. Margaret recovered quickly, smiled brittle. Doug withdrew from the Cosine in 2024. The bank allowed it. He moved to Tampa. He started over. I repeated. Flat. Yes, I nodded slowly. I see. I picked up my pen, didn't write anything, just held it. Before I respond, I should explain something to my parents and to you. I had been waiting 7 years and 3 months for this afternoon. I'd not just been waiting. I'd been preparing. The folder on Nadia's desk, the one she'd brought to my office 20 minutes before this meeting, wasn't a recent file. It was a folder I'd been adding to since March 2019. 3 documents, each of them powerful enough on its own to end a conversation. Together. They were the reason I'd been able to sit across this table from Margaret Offutt without a single shake in my hand. But before I tell you what was in the folder, And before I tell you what my father admitted in the next few minutes, let me pause and say this. If you've ever sat across from family who arrived with paperwork in hand and a soba story they'd rehearsed in the car, you already know the feeling I'm trying to describe. The strange calm that comes when you've waited long enough that you stop being afraid. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Drop a comment with the first thing you'd have said if you were me. Let's keep going. Back in the room, Margaret was waiting. Phil was still looking at his hands. I set the pen down, picked it up again, set it down a second time. I was not playing for time. I was choosing not to give her the rhythm she wanted. I let 12 seconds pass. I counted them. Then I said, "I need to back up to 2017. Both of you remember 2017, so this won't take long. In July 2017, I turned 25. 3 weeks later, I drove down to Charlotte. I had paperwork from First Union Trust. A letter informing me that the Walter Offutt Family Trust, of which I was the named beneficiary, had reached maturity. I was eligible to claim the full balance. I walked into the bank on a Tuesday morning, wore a blazer that was probably too warm for August, sat across from a trust officer named Renee Matz, who had been with First Union for 19 years and had seen most things. She pulled up the account. Original principal, 1997, $480,000. Walter had funded the trust the year I turned 5. Conservative growth target 20 years of S&P tracking returns plus dividend reinvestment. Standard projection by 2017 approximately $1.4 million. Actual balance as of August 1st, 2017, $41,218. Renee didn't move. I didn't move. The silence in her cubicle was the silence of a person who had just opened the wrong door and didn't want to make it worse by speaking too quickly. I asked to see the withdrawal history. She printed it. 8 withdrawals between 2008 and 2016. Each one signed by Philip Offutt and Margaret Offutt in their capacity as co-rusties during my minority and the gray years after I turned 18 when they remained on the account because no one had filed the paperwork to remove them. $280,000 in 2010, $46,000 in 2012, $85,000 in 2014, the rest in smaller draws. I asked Renee Dry if she'd ever seen a trust drain this thoroughly. She didn't smile. She said, "Honey, this isn't the worst one this month." I drove back to D.C. that night. Didn't tell anyone, not yet. I gave them 16 months. I told myself I needed 16 months to research the legal landscape to retain a quiet opinion from a Charlotte attorney to make sure I understood what could and couldn't be recovered. That was true. It was also true that I needed 16 months to decide whether I wanted to bring it up at all. Thanksgiving 2018. I drove down to Asheville, stayed at the house I'd grown up in, slept in my childhood bedroom where the comforter still had the small bleach mark from when I dropped a chemistry experiment in high school. After dinner, I asked Phil and Margaret to sit at the kitchen table. Doug was in the living room with the football game on. He could hear us through the wall. I knew he could. I opened the folder, spread the trust statements out. Margaret looked, Phil looked. Neither of them was surprised. "What is this, Tony?" "It's my trust or what's left of it." Phil put his hand on the table, didn't say anything. Margaret straightened her shoulders. "Tony, your father and I treated that money as a family resource. That's what family does. We made decisions for this household for 30 years. The money was part of how we made those decisions work. You took $418,000. It wasn't taking. It was managing." I looked at Phil. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, did you ever plan to repay it?" He opened his mouth. Margaret cut in. "That's not how family works, Tony. We don't keep ledgers." I closed the folder. The living room TV kept playing. The Cowboys were down by 6. I said, "Okay." I went upstairs, packed my bag, drove back to D.C. at 3:00 in the morning. I didn't call. They didn't call. That was the last time I sat at that table. 3 weeks later, my grandfather Walter called me. He was 83, congestive heart failure. Diagnosed in 2017. Hospice care since October. He lived in a small apartment in Asheville, now near the river, with a hospice nurse named Dayanuho came in 3 mornings a week. He didn't waste time. He never did. "Tony, tell me about the trust." I sat down on my kitchen floor. I told him the original principle, the 8 withdrawals, the dates, the signatures, the balance Renee Mathers had pulled up in August 2017. The line was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You still wearing that watch?" I pulled it from under my blouse. Hamilton silver hunter case inscribed 2 words on the back. 15 years gone since he'd given it to me at 10:00. I looked at the inscription. Make it count. Yes, Grandpa, every day, good. He didn't say anything else about the trust, not on that call. I drove down to Asheville the following weekend. Sat with him for 3 hours. We talked about the cottage in Beaufort. We talked about my work. We didn't talk about Phil and Margaret. When I left, he held my hand and said only, "You make it count, Tony. You hear me? You make it count." I told him I would. 3 weeks after that, in late January 2019, Walter met with his estate attorney. I didn't know it at the time. He didn't tell anyone. 2 weeks after that, he mailed a yellowed manila envelope from his hospice bed. He addressed it himself. Diane drove it to the post office on her way home. Walter Offutt died on February 4th, 2019, quietly in his sleep. The envelope was still in transit when he passed. The funeral was on February 9th, 2019. Saturday Episcopal Church on Chestnut Street in Asheville. The same church where Walter had been baptized in 1936, married in 1958, and where Constance, his wife, my grandmother, had been buried in 2007. The morning was cold, 41 degrees. Rain held off. I drove down from D.C. the night before, stayed at a Holiday Inn off the interstate. Didn't tell my parents I was in town. Didn't ask where they were staying. I arrived at the church at 9:30. The casket was already at the front, closed. Walter had asked for closed. I sat in the second row, left side, by myself. Margaret arrived at 9:45 in a black wool dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings. She did not look at me. Phil came in behind her in his dark gray suit, the one he'd worn to every funeral since 2003. Doug sat in the front row. He cried during the eulogy in a way that drew a few heads, including the priest's. I didn't cry during the service. I held the pocket watch in my right hand the whole time outside my blouse where anyone could see it. It was the first time I'd worn it visibly in 21 years. Walter had been the only person who knew I wore it. After the service, the procession went to the cemetery. After the burial, we reconvened in the parish hall for the reception. Sandwiches on platters, coffee in urns, 43 guests by my later count from the guest book. A man I didn't recognize was already there when I walked in. He wore a charcoal suit, well cut. Clipped to his pocket was a small brass and blue identification badge, the kind notaries clip on for official business. Margaret had brought him. I didn't know why. Not yet. 4:30 p.m. The reception was thinning. Maybe 25 people left in the room. Margaret stood up at the head table. She clinked to the side of her water glass with a butter knife. The sound was loud in a way she had clearly rehearsed. "Friends, family, if I may, I have an announcement. It may surprise some of you, but it's necessary for the integrity of this family moving forward." The notary moved up beside her. He carried a leather folder, set it on the table, opened it, took out a 2-page document. Margaret held the document up, took a breath, read aloud. Declaration of Estrangement, filed this 9th day of February, 2019 in Buncombe County, North Carolina. As of today's date, Tony Marie Offutt is no longer recognized as a member of the immediate family of Philip and Margaret Offutt. We do this with sorrow, but with clarity. She paused, looked up, looked directly at me. The room had gone completely silent. "You're not my daughter anymore." It was a sentence, just 8 words. The notary stamped the document. Phil came forward, signed it with a shaking hand. Margaret signed it. The notary witnessed it. He placed his stamp again on the second page with the date in clear digits. 43 guests in that room. Most looked at the floor. A few looked at me. My Aunt Ruth, Phil's sister, put her hand over her mouth. I stood up. I walked to the head table. Margaret took half a step back. I did not speak to her. I addressed the notary directly. Polite, professional. "May I have a copy, please?" He blinked, looked at Margaret. Margaret didn't say anything. I had not been part of her rehearsal. He handed me a copy. I folded it twice, slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat. I walked out of the parish hall across the parking lot, got into my car. I drove 3 blocks before I let myself cry. 3 days later, a Tuesday, I was back in my D.C. apartment. February 12, 2019. I'd gone to work that Monday because the alternative was sitting in my kitchen. That Tuesday evening, I checked the mail in the building lobby. Among the bills was a yellowed manila envelope, cursive on the front and shaking handwriting. I recognized postmark, Asheville, North Carolina. January 28, 2019. Walter had mailed it 12 days before he died. I took the envelope upstairs, sat on my kitchen floor, the same kitchen floor where I'd sat for the phone call in December. I opened it. Inside was one sheet of yellow legal paper folded in thirds. Walter's handwriting filled the top half. A list, 8 entries. March 12, 2008, $46,000. Phil plus Margaret. August 4, 2010. $280,000. Phil plus Margaret. February 11, 2012. $46,000. Phil plus Margaret. June 9, 2014. $85,000. Phil plus Margaret and 4 more entries, smaller amounts, finishing with March 2016. Below the list, 4 sentences in Walter's hand. I knew Tony. I figured it out in 17 when you turned 25 and stopped calling. I called the trust officer myself. I changed my will 3 weeks ago. Your father and your mother are out. They'll come for you eventually. When they do, you make it count. I read it 3 times, sitting on the cold tile. Then I read it a 4th time out loud, quietly. The handwriting was Walter Athai's end. The shake was visible. The S in stopped calling had taken him 2 strokes. The dash before his initial was longer than he meant, but the verbs were chosen. The dates were exact. He had made the list with the same care he'd brought to everything he ever signed. He had wanted me to know he had not been fooled. He had wanted me to know he had chosen me on purpose. I put the envelope inside a leather portfolio, slid the portfolio into my safe. I made a folder on my desk that night, blue, legalized. I labeled it in plain block letters, Walter. The 2019 Declaration of Estrangement went into the folder. Walter's letter went into the folder. The 2017 trust statements went into the folder. I put the folder in my office drawer. I waited. The next 7 years compressed faster than the 7 before them. Walter's will. Executed February 1st, 2019, 3 days before he died. Named me sole beneficiary of his remaining estate. $1.02, $2 million in a testament trust with a clean clause, distributable to the named beneficiary regardless of family status, family residence, or family disposition. Margaret tried to contest, filed in March 2019. She submitted as evidence of my disqualification the very declaration of estrangement she'd commissioned at the funeral. She seemed to believe that severing me from the family had also severed me from Walter's stated wishes. It hadn't. The will didn't require family status. It only required identity, and mine was on file in 3 places. The contest was dismissed in May 2020. I didn't celebrate. I went back to work. Whitford and Associates. I made senior associate in 2021, partner. In 2023, I narrowed my practice to intra-family trust disputes, a specialty other firms found uncomfortable. I learned that uncomfortable is where the cases pay. In 2024, I got a 1-line email from Doug. Hey, Tony, just letting you know I'm out of the lake house causing. Tampa's better for me. I didn't respond. In April 2026, a woman named Sharon Pell, a neighbor of my parents from down the street in Asheville, sent me a Facebook message. We weren't friends, but she'd known me as a kid. Tony, I thought you should hear it from me. The lake house went into pre-foreclosure last week. It was in the paper. I'd already known. I'd been tracking the title myself on a $19 a month real estate alert service. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept watching the calendar because I knew what foreclosure deadlines do to people like my mother. And then last Monday, the receptionist downstairs got the call back to conference room B4, 5:58 p.m. Tuesday afternoon. The 2026 demand letter centered on the cherrywood table between us. I had not signed it. I had not spoken in about 30 seconds. Margaret leaned forward, elbows on the table. A cardigan from 2012 caught the late afternoon light. Her voice dropped to the register I knew the way I knew my own handwriting. The low, gentle, surgical register. Tony, sweetheart, I know the past has been complicated. We've all said things we wish we hadn't. Phil and I are not asking you to forget. We are asking you to remember that we are still your parents. We sacrificed everything for you. You owe us. She said it cleanly this time, not as a whisper, as a thesis. Phil shifted in his chair. He looked at his hands. He did not look at me. I let the sentence sit on the table next to the document. Internally, I noted 3 things. First, she'd waited 7 years to say those words to my face. She'd been carrying them like a loaded thing. They came out almost reverent. Second, she didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, we miss you. She did not say, what your father and I did was wrong. The negotiation began at the only place she could afford to start it, at debt. Third, she had no idea what was in the folder on Nadia's desk. I glanced through the glass wall of the conference room. Nadia at her desk on the far side of the bullpen, head tilted just slightly toward us. 2 of my colleagues, Edith Cunbo and Marisol, at their desks, heads down. Greg Whitford's office door was now closed. I picked up the pen on the table, didn't write anything, just held it. I have a habit. I needed something in my hand. I set the pen down, folded my hands on top of the document. I said, Dad, do you want to tell me what you actually came here to say? Phil's head came up. He looked at Margaret, didn't speak. Margaret cut in fast. Phil, let me handle this. Tony, we don't have time for theatrics. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Phil. I'm not asking you, Margaret. I'm asking him. Margaret blinked. That was the first time I'd called my mother by her first name in 7 years. She didn't recover quickly. Phil watched her face. He understood the way he always understood 3 beats late that something had shifted. Now, before I tell you what was inside the folder on Nadia's desk and what my father said in the next 4 minutes, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to call a parent by their first name in a room full of glass? Drop it in the comments. And if this story is hitting where you live, hit subscribe. We're not done. Back in the room. Margaret tried to recover. Tony, your father isn't well. You can't expect him to. I said, Margaret, I'm not asking him to do anything. I am asking him a question. He can choose to answer it or not. Phil didn't answer. I asked him another way. Dad, do you remember Thanksgiving 2018? The room went very still. The K Street traffic faded under the glass. Phil's mouth opened, closed, opened. Yes, Margaret turned in her chair. Don't engage with this, Phil, but Phil's eyes were on me. He had heard the question. He had answered it. And the answer was the beginning of something. I knew the next 30 seconds were going to break a man who had spent 40 years not breaking. I was ready for it. I had been ready for years. I asked again, slower. Dad, do you remember what Mom said when I showed you the trust statements that Thanksgiving? Phil's hands started to shake. He looked down at them as if they belonged to someone else. Yes, tell me what she said. Margaret stood up halfway. Philip Edward Offit, if you say one more word. Margaret, sit down. Phil's voice was quiet, but it had a weight in it I had never heard him use with her. She sat. She looked at him as if he had struck her. He didn't look back at her. He looked at me. Your mother said she treated the trust as a family resource and that family doesn't keep ledgers. I nodded once. Thank you for remembering. I let the moment sit. 3 seconds, 5. I have a tolerance for silence that most people do not have. I built it on purpose. Then I pressed the intercom on the credenza behind me. Nadia, please bring me the Walter Offit folder from my office, the blue one, 3rd drawer. There was a pause, then Nadia's voice, clean, professional. On my way, I clicked the intercom off. Margaret looked at the door, looked at Phil, looked at me. Tony, what folder? What is this? I didn't answer. She tried again. Tony, honey, we're not here to relitigate the past. We're here because your father and I are in real trouble. We're going to lose the house. Your grandfather helped us. She stopped herself a beat too late. Phil flinched. I noted the slip. I did not respond to it. I waited for Nadia. 40 seconds by my count, long enough that Margaret started to fill the silence, then stopped, started, stopped. Phil did not move. The fluorescent overhead hummed. The pocket watch was warm against my collarbone. The door knob turned. Nadia entered, one folder in her hand, blue legal-sized faded label, 2 block letters, Walter. She set it on the table directly in front of me. She did not look at my parents. She didn't speak. She turned, walked back out, closed the door behind her with the same softness she'd used opening it. No theatrics, nothing performed. Margaret watched her go. Tony, who is that young woman? That's my assistant. I rested my hand on top of the folder. Margaret leaned forward, tried for control again. Honey, whatever you have in there, whatever you've kept, it doesn't change what we're asking. We are asking for help. Family helps family. That's what your grandfather would have wanted. Phil made a small sound, almost a laugh, bitter. She turned on him. Phil, what? He shook his head. Nothing, Margaret, nothing. I opened the folder. Inside, 3 items. On top, a folded 2-page document, 7 years younger than this morning, with a notary stamp from Buncombe County, and a date that read February 9th, 2019. The 2019 Declaration of Estrangement. Beneath it, a yellowed manila envelope, cursive on the front, postmark January 28, 2019. Beneath that, a stack of trust withdrawal statements from First Union, August 2017, print date, 8 signed transactions highlighted in pink. I did not lift any of the documents yet. I just let her see the corner of each. The top sheet visible enough that the words Declaration of Estrangement showed. Margaret's face changed. The skin around her eyes tightened. Her jaw moved. Her mouth opened slightly. Closed. Phil read the top of the document upside down. He closed his eyes. I noticed everything. The small, involuntary lift of Margaret's left hand toward her purse. The slow drop of Phil's shoulders. The way Margaret's pupils dilated when she registered what she was looking at. I let the recognition sit for 15 seconds. Then I reached for the top document. I picked it up by its edges. I lifted the 2019 Declaration of Arrangement out off the folder. I held it for a half second, then I set it down on the table. I slid it across the cherry wood, slow, deliberate, across the same 6 FT of polished surface Margaret had used 20 minutes earlier to send her $300,000 demand at me. I placed it directly beside the bailout letter. The 2 notarized documents lay side by side, twin formal sheets with twin embossed seals. I did not speak. Margaret's mouth opened. Her eyes were on the page. She didn't reach for it. She stared. Phil read the title slowly. He closed high-size a second time. He kept them closed. I touched the pocket watch through my blouse. Hamilton silver warm against my collarbone. I said one sentence, quiet, conversational. I haven't been your daughter since 2019. You made that legal. I'm just the lawyer you came to see today. Margaret's lips moved. No sound at first, then a small sound, then a sentence. That was a difficult day, Tony. We were grieving. We weren't ourselves. You hired a notary in advance, Margaret. She didn't have an answer. You signetwo pages in front of 43 guests. She didn't have an answer. You used that document in 2020 to contest Grandpa's will. Her face froze. You didn't know I knew about the contest. I know about the contest. I have the filings. I have the dismissal order. I have all of it in that folder. Phil's shoulders began to shake. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on Margaret. She made one last attempt, voice fraying. Tony, we were trying to protect the family from what, Margaret? From we didn't want to fight at the funeral. You started the fight at the funeral with a notary who you had to call ahead, who you had to brief, who you had to pay a fee to. I let the sentence land. You did not improvise on the worst day of my grandfather's life. You scheduled it. She had nothing. She sat back in her chair as if her legs had just given out underneath her. Phil's eyes were still closed. Margaret made one more attempt. The last attempt of the prepared rehearsal. Tony, none of that changes the facts of this week. We are going Talos, the lake house. Your father is 67 years old. We have nowhere to go after this. Do you understand what you are doing? I did not raise my voice. I understand exactly what I am doing, Margaret. You are going to make us homeless. You bought a lake house with my money in 2010. You signed for an equity loan against it in 2017. You defaulted on the equity loan in 2024. You drove 9 hours yesterday to ask the daughter you legally disowned to bail you out. You are going to be homeless because of decisions you made over 16 years. None of those decisions were mine. She tried to interrupt. I kept going. Same volume. I have not raised my voice in this room, and I am not going to. Listen to me carefully. I am not your daughter. I am the woman whose trust you stole. I am the lawyer in this office. And as the lawyer in this office, I have one more thing to show you. I turned in my chair. Phil opened his eyes. He looked finally directly at me. His face had changed. There was no recovery in it anymore. No fight, no alignment with Margaret. He was for the first time in this conversation, for the first time in this decade, alone in his own body. He opened his mouth. "Tony, before you show us anything else, I need to tell you something." Margaret turned to him fast, put a hand on his arm. "Phil, don't." He moved her hand off, not roughly, just firmly, as if removing a weight from where it had been resting for 40 years. "Margaret, stop." She froze. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. He took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his chest. My father started talking. The words came slow. He had been rehearsing them, I realized, for a long time. He just had never had the room to use them. The trust money, your trust money. The $280,000 we took out in August 2010. That was the down payment on the lake house. I didn't move. Margaret's hand reached for him again, stopped halfway. The $46,000 in 2012. That was the boat. The Boston were. Your mother wanted it. I signed the $85,000 in 2014. That was the second floor renovation, the screened porch, the dock repair. I signed the $35,000 in 2016 was a buffer your mother, and I used to push our credit cards down before the credit pull on the equity loan. I signed that too. He took a breath. His hands shook. I always told myself we'd put it back. Your mother and I told each other every year that we'd put it back. We never did, not $1, not one. Margaret sat very still. Her face was pale. The strategic poise had drained out of her. Phil kept going. The boat sank in 2014. Engine fire 2 months after we bought it. Whenever told you because we didn't want you asking about the insurance check. $42,000. We used that on the renovation, too. He paused. You sent us a Father's Day card that year with a picture of you and Grandpa fishing at the cottage. I put it in my sock drawer. I couldn't look at it. I knew your grandfather was sitting at his kitchen table in 2017, figuring out what we had done. I knew I didn't pick up the phone. I let him die without picking up the phone. He stopped, looked at the table. Tony, I'm sorry, I know that's worth nothing. His shoulders shook once. He did not look up. I did not say it's okay. I did not say anything at all. My father's hands kept shaking on the table. He pressed them flat to make them stop. They didn't. He said, I should have stopped her. I should have stopped me. There were 100 chances. After the 2010 withdrawal, after the 2012 withdrawal, after your Aunt Ruth called me in 2014 and asked if Tony was getting any of this, I told her, you were getting all of it. I lied to my sister. Margaret made a small sound, something between a word and a breath. He kept going. Ruth knew. She'd seen the lake house. She'd seen the new kitchen. She'd done the math. She gave me one chance to tell her the truth on that phone call. I told her you were on a tropical vacation, Margaret, and I had bought you for graduating Kellogg. There was no vacation. You graduated and went straight to work. I made up a vacation. He pressed his hands flat. They still shook. I let your mother run the financials because she was good at them. I let her drive the decisions because I didn't want the fight at the kitchen table. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I was keeping a thief. He stopped, looked up at me for the first time in the speech. I am the man who watched his own father get sick knowing what we had taken. And I never picked up the phone. I never even sent him a card after the diagnosis. He looked back down at his hands. I sat across from him. 40 years of yielding had a face. It was the face off my father at 67, weeping silently across a polished cherrywood table in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of a building he had never seen before today. I did not move toward him. I did not soften. I did not say it's okay. I did not say I forgive you. I did not say anything. The pocket watch was warm against my collarbone. I let him sit in his own admission. Through the glass wall of conference room B, I saw Greg Whitford come out of his office. He glanced once toward our conference room, took in Phil's posture, took in Margaret's face, took in the documents on the table. He didn't approach, but across the bullpen, Nadia stood up at her desk. She was watching me, waiting for the look. I gave her the smallest nod. She walked calm and quiet across the floor, reached the conference room door, did not enter, reached around the door frame to the blind cord. She pulled it slowly, hand over hand. The vertical blinds along the bullpen wall closed. One slat, then the next, the room dimmed by a third. When she was done, she stepped back, closed the door. We were now invisible from the rest of the floor. Phil didn't notice. His head was still down. Margaret noticed. She looked up, saw the closed blinds, realized for what I am almost certain was the first time in her life that she was inside the consequence, not above it. I watched her face do the math. I let Nadia carefully. She pushed the chair back hard enough that it hit the credenza behind her. The carf rattled. Her voice rose now that we were behind closed blinds, as if the blinds had given her permission. You ungrateful, we raised you, we fed you. We put a roof over your head. We sacrificed everything for you, everything. She slammed her palm flat on the table. The cherry wood rang. Phil flinched. He did not look up. Do you know what we gave for you? We gave 30 years of our lives. We gave our marriage. We gave our peace. We gave everything. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand up. I looked at her steady, conversational. I know, Margaret. That's what the letter says. I gestured with one open hand to the 2019 Declaration of Estrangement on the table. You signed a document 7 years ago saying I wasn't your daughter. I believed you then. I believe you now. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, closed it. She made the small sound that comes out of a person when they realize the room they are standing in does not contain the air they have been rehearsing in. She sat down slow. Phil still hadn't looked up. The fluorescent overhead hummed. Outside the closed blinds, the office made its faint, normal sounds. A phone ringing 2 desks away. Someone laughing at the printer. Inside conference room B, my mother had stopped speaking for the first time in 42 years. I reached for the blue folder again. This time I took out the yellowed envelope. I set it on the table beside the 2 notarized documents. 3 documents in a row now. The bailout letter from this morning. The Declaration of Estrangement from 2019. Walter's letter from January 2019. Margaret stared at the yellow envelope. What is that? This is from Grandpa. I opened the flap. He mailed it to me 12 days before he died from his hospice bed. He'd already met with his estate attorney. He had already rewritten his will. He knew what you had done with the trust. He knew before he died. I took out the single sheet of yellow legal paper. I did not read the whole thing aloud. I read one sentence, the last sentence. The handwriting steady even at the end. They'll come for you eventually. When they do, you make it count. I set the letter down. I touched the pocket watch through my blouse. Hamilton's silver hunter case. 2 words on the back I had not needed to look at in 24 years. I unclipped the chain, took the watch out from under my collar, set it on the table beside Walter's letter. Hunter case up. The inscription faced the ceiling. Make it count. Margaret looked at the watch, looked at Walter's letter, looked at the 2019 Declaration of Estrangement. 3 things she had failed to disappear. Phil pressed both palms against his eyes. Oh, Dad. His shoulders shook quietly. Margaret stared at the letter. She did not pick it up. She did not touch it. She said very quietly, almost to herself. He never told me he knew. I looked at her. He didn't need to tell you, Margaret. He told me. 3 documents and 1 silver watch on the table. 40 years of family quietly summed up in less than 2 square feet of paper and 1 inscription. I let her see it. It placed both hands flat on the table, said, I'm not going to give you the $300,000, Margaret. Phil, I was never going to. I've known you were going to ask for it for the last 6 months. Margaret made a sound, not a word, and I'm not going to sue you for what you took. I could have. The Charlotte attorney told me in 2019 there was a path to recovery with interest that might have come to $360,000. I chose not to. Grandpa's will already settled what was mine. Phil nodded once, eyes still closed. Margaret tried. So what do you want, Tony? What is this? What? I looked at her. I don't want anything from you, Margaret. That's the boundary. That's always been the boundary. You made it legal in 2019. I'm just enforcing it in 2026. I paused. Let the words sit. You said it to me yourself in front of 43 people. I let one breath pass. You're not my daughter anymore. I said it the way she had said it. 8 words, a sentence. I was not throwing it back at her, I was citing her. Margaret's eyes filled, noted them. I did not feel the warmth I would have once felt at seeing my mother cry. I felt nothing. I felt the absence of something that should have been a feeling. I had felt that absence for 7 years. It was familiar. I was at peace with it. Across the table, Phil was very still. 3 documents lay between us. Outside the closed blinds, a phone rang twice and went quiet. I opened the small card holder on the table beside my pen. I took out a single business card, slid it across the cherry wood. Slow. The same 6 feet, the same surface, but this time no notary stamp, no ritual, just a card. Greg Whitford, senior partner, bankruptcy restructuring. This is Greg Whitford. He is a senior partner here. He handles foreclosure restructuring. He's not cheap. He's good. If you call him tomorrow morning, he will give you 1 consultation on the house. He'll be honest about what's possible and what isn't. Margaret looked at the card, did not pick it up immediately. Phil picked it up, slid it into his suit pocket. Thank you. He said it to me. He did not look at Margaret when he said it. I stood up. Nadia will walk you both to the lobby. There is a Hyatt 3 blocks south on I Street. I'd recommend you not drive back tonight. I'd also recommend you take separate hotel rooms if you need to. I picked up the 2019 Declaration of Arrangement from the table, slid it back into the blue folder. I picked up Walter's letter, slid it back into the folder. I left the $300,000 bailout letter on the table. I did not pick it up. I did not return it. I did not sign it. I left it there. Margaret picked up her purse. Slow, she stood at the door. She turned. Tony. I did not let her finish. Good night, Margaret. She nodded once tight, walked out. Phil followed her 3 seconds later. He did not turn around at the door. The door clicked shut. I stood alone in conference room B. I walked to the window wall, pulled the blind cord. Slowly, the vertical slats opened one by one. The late afternoon sun came back in. K Street traffic 10 stories below the Verizon building catching gold off the west. 5:43 p.m. Nadia knocked once, came in, set a glass of water on the table beside the bailout letter. She looked at the letter, did not touch it. She looked at me. You okay? I will be. I have been. She nodded once, walked back out. A minute later, Greg Whitford walked past the door, glanced in, saw me at the window, did not say anything, gave me a small nod, the kind of nod a partner gives another partner who has just done something hard the right way. He walked-in. I stood at the window a few more minutes. I picked up the blue folder, slid it under my arm. I left the $300,000 demand letter on the cherrywood. Centered notary seal up. It would be there when the cleaning crew came at 7. They would assume it was a draft someone forgot. It was a draft someone forgot. The pocket watch was warm against my collarbone. I walked out of conference room B, past Nadia's desk, past Greg's closed door, past the bullpen. I went back to my office. I had a trust amendment to finish reading for a client named Hannah Briscoe. My grandfather told me once, in the way he said most things, as a fact he had already verified, that the only inheritance worth anything is the one you make count. And that Tuesday afternoon in conference room B with 2 notarized letters and 1 yellowed envelope on a polished cherry table, and the people who'd signed those letters sitting across from me. I finally understood that he had not been talking about the money. That's my story. 7 years of silence, 1 yellowed envelope, a pocket watch still warm under my collar. If this reminded you that boundaries don't have to be loud to hold, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Drop a comment, hit subscribe.